Look at this girl. Who does she think she is? The words cut through the clatter of dishes and drunken laughter inside Cooper's bar and grill. The young waitress in the simple blue uniform didn't respond, her hand steady on the tray despite the venom in her manager's voice. Then came the grab, a rough hand seizing her wrist. Then another shove, plates wobbling dangerously. And finally, a fist cracked across her face, snapping her head violently to the side. Time seemed to fracture. Plates exploded midair, shards of ceramic and glass spinning in slow motion like deadly snowflakes. Food splattered across the dark wood floor, a Jackson Pollock of humiliation. The young woman crashed into a nearby table, her white apron now decorated with crimson droplets from her split lip. But as the manager stood there, chest heaving with self-righteous rage, as customers gasped and scrambled back, as the bar fell into stunned silence, no one noticed. The regular patron in the corner booth quietly lower his phone. The video was already sent, the message already delivered. What secret was hidden behind that waitress's quiet eyes? And how could a single punch inside a neighborhood bar summon the most dangerous man in the city? If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. The afternoon light struggled through the grimy windows of Cooper's Bar and Grill, a neighborhood institution that had aged from charm into decay. It was the kind of place where the smell of stale beer had permanently married the wood, where the laughter was always a bit too loud to cover the desperation, and where the staff knew to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. Standing behind the bar, systematically wiping down glasses with mechanical precision, was a young woman who seemed almost translucent in her desire to be invisible. She was in her mid-20s, petite and quietly beautiful, with dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail and warm brown eyes that held carefully guarded depths. Her blue uniform dress with its white collar and apron was spotless despite the chaos of lunch rush. What the staff of Cooper's Bar and Grill couldn't know was that this waitress, Lorraine Pollard, wasn't here by accident. She had arrived 3 weeks prior, using her mother's maiden name on the application, erasing any connection to a surname that made grown men whisper and cross themselves. She was a woman on a mission to prove she could build something real on her own merit, stripped of inherited power and the shadow of a brother whose name alone could empty rooms. Stephen Cooper saw her as prey first. Cooper, 39, and was built like a former athlete gone soft, with slicked-back dark hair and a face that twisted naturally into sneers. 15 years of petty authority as manager had fermented his insecurity into toxic aggression. To him, the world was simple. There were people who commanded respect through fear, and there were people who existed to absorb that fear. This new waitress, with her quiet confidence and refusal to flirt or fawn, was a walking violation of his carefully constructed hierarchy. "Think she's better than us," Cooper muttered to Derek, his wiry assistant manager who laughed at every cruel joke. 3 weeks, and she hasn't smiled at me once. Rita, the veteran waitress with kind eyes and permanent exhaustion, stayed quiet nearby. She had watched Stephen Cooper destroy 3 employees in the past year. This girl seemed different, stronger, somehow, but that only made her a more appealing target. Their opportunity arrived during the afternoon rush. The bar was packed construction workers, office drones, regulars nursing decades-old grudges. Lorraine emerged from the kitchen, balancing a full tray. Burgers, fries, 3 pint glasses of beer. The path to table 7 required navigating past Stephen, who stood deliberately in the narrow passage between the bar and the dining area. "Excuse me, Stephen," she said politely but firmly. He didn't move. His eyes held something ugly, the look of a man who'd been waiting for this exact moment. "You know what your problem is?" His voice was loud enough to draw attention. "You think you're special, but you're just another waitress who can't handle the pressure." Lorraine's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I just need to get past." Stephen shifted his weight, deliberately jostling her arm. The tray tilted. She tried to compensate, but physics and malice conspired against her. The tray slipped, and that's when Stephen Cooper made the decision that would destroy his entire life. He grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise and shoved her backward. "Clumsy bitch!" Then his fist flew. The punch connected with her cheekbone with a sickening crack. Her head snapped to the side, body following the momentum. The tray exploded, outward plates shattering, beer spraying in golden arcs, French fries scattering like pickup sticks. Lorraine's shoulder hit table 6, glasses toppling, customers shouting and scrambling back. She crumpled to the floor among the wreckage, one hand rising to her face, the other braced against the sticky floorboards. Blood welled from her split lip, tracking down her chin and spotting her white apron. The bar fell into shocked silence. Stephen stood over her, chest heaving, fists still clenched. That's what happens when you don't respect. But in the corner booth, old Tom, a regular everyone assumed was just another retired drunk, calmly placed his phone face down. His weathered hands were steady. His expression was grim. The text message had already been sent to a contact saved simply as N.P. You need to see this, now. What Stephen Cooper didn't know was that the punch he threw didn't break his victim, but it destroyed his entire life instead. Lorraine Pollard learned about invisibility when she was 7 years old. It was the day her father was murdered, gunned down in their driveway while unloading groceries. She remembered the oranges rolling across the concrete, bright and innocent against the spreading pool of crimson. She remembered her mother's scream. And she remembered her older brother Nick, only 14 at the time, stepping in front of her with his arms spread wide, shielding her from the sight even as something fundamental died in his eyes. That was the day Nick stopped being a boy and became something else entirely. Their mother died 2 years later, a heart that simply gave up from carrying too much grief. At 16, Nick Pollard became both parent and protector to his 9-year-old sister. But protection in their world came with a price tag written in blood and power. Nick built an empire from the ashes of their parents' deaths. By 25, his name was whispered in backrooms and feared in boardrooms. The Pollard organization controlled everything that mattered in the city: imports, protection, enforcement. He was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoted to one thing above all else: keeping Lorraine safe. Too safe. Lorraine grew up in a gilded cage. Private schools where no one dared bully her, not after the first kid who tried disappeared from the roster the next day. His family suddenly relocated to another state. Birthday parties where children came because their parents were too terrified to decline the invitation. College where professors gave her grades she didn't earn, too afraid of what her last name meant. She never asked for any of it. She begged Nick to stop, to let her live normally. But every time, he would pull her close, kiss her forehead, and say the same thing. I already lost Mom and Dad. I will burn this entire city down before I lose you too. It was love. Suffocating, absolute, terrifying love. So, at 24, Lorraine made a decision. She would disappear not from Nick's life, but from his shadow. She withdrew her inheritance money, changed her last name to her mother's maiden name, Torres, and left the city. No bodyguards, no surveillance. Just a note that said, I need to know who I am without your name protecting me. I love you. Please let me do this. Nick didn't respond for 3 days. When he finally called, his voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. You check in once a week. You keep your location services on. And if anyone hurts you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Nick, that's the whole point. I need to handle my own problems. Lorraine. His voice cracked on her name. You're asking me to let you walk into a world that will see you as weak because you're kind. That will see you as prey because you're small. I've spent 15 years making sure no one could touch you. And now you want me to just watch? She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I want you to trust me. I want to earn something that's mine. Please, big brother. Please. The silence stretched for an eternity. 1 week, he finally whispered. You check in every week. That's non-negotiable. It was the hardest compromise Nick Pollard had ever made. That was 8 months ago. Since then, Lorraine had worked 3 different jobs: a bookstore clerk, a coffee shop barista, and now a waitress at Cooper's Bar and Grill. She used Torres on all applications, paid cash for her tiny studio apartment, made friends who knew nothing about her family or her past. She earned every dollar, every smile, every small victory. For the first time in her life, she felt real. Rita, the veteran waitress, had taken her under her wing. They'd share cigarettes on break. Lorraine never smoked, just held them for company, and Rita would tell stories about her 3 kids, her deadbeat ex-husband, her dreams of opening a small bakery someday. Rita treated her like an equal, complained to her, trusted her. It was the most valuable gift Lorraine had ever received. Even Stephen Cooper's hostility felt strangely validating. He hated her for who he thought she was, a competent woman who threatened his authority. Not for who her brother was. It was honest hatred, earned through her own merit. Old Tom, the regular in the corner booth, had become something of a guardian angel. He reminded her of her father, quiet, observant, kind. He always left generous tips, and once, when a drunk customer got handsy, Tom had stood up with such quiet authority that the man had simply walked away. What Lorraine didn't know was that Tom wasn't just a kind regular. He was one of Nick's most trusted men, assigned to watch her from a distance. Not to interfere, Nick had promised that, but to observe, to make sure she was safe, to be the failsafe Nick couldn't live without. Tom had sent 3 previous reports to Nick. She's doing well, independent, happy, no intervention needed. But the 4th message was different. As Lorraine lay on that floor, blood on her apron, humiliation burning hotter than the pain in her face, as Stephen Cooper stood over her with self-righteous fury, as the bar full of witnesses did nothing, old Tom pressed, send on a video that would shatter the fragile peace Lorraine had fought so hard to build, because some things, some violations crossed a line that even promises couldn't hold back. And Nick Pollard was about to break every promise he'd ever made. Lorraine remained on the floor for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Her cheek throbbed with a deep, bone-aching pain that radiated through her skull. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. But worse than the physical pain was the suffocating weight of humiliation. The stares, the whispers, the awful silence of witnesses who would do nothing. She had left everything behind to prove she could handle herself. And now she was bleeding on a sticky bar floor while her abuser stood over her, righteous and untouched. "Get up," Stephen spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Clean this mess up, and it's coming out of your paycheck, all of it." Rita rushed forward, her face pale with shock and rage. "Stephen, you can't just—" "Stay out of this, Rita, unless you want to be next." Rita froze, torn between conscience and self-preservation. Lorraine saw the decision play across her friend's face the moment when survival instinct won over morality. It wasn't Rita's fault. This was the world Stephen Cooper had created, where fear murdered decency every single day. Lorraine slowly pushed herself up, refusing to cry. Her hands shook as she touched her split lip, fingers coming away red. She wouldn't give Stephen the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Not here. Not now. I'm sorry," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. Not because she meant them, but because submission was sometimes the only path to survival. Stephen's smile was ugly and triumphant. "That's better. Now clean." His phone rang, then Derek's, then Rita's, then phones throughout the bar started buzzing in a cascading wave of notifications. Stephen frowned, pulling out his phone. His expression shifted from confusion to irritation as he stared at the screen. Derek's face went white. One of the regulars at the bar started laughing, a shocked, disbelieving sound. "Holy shit," someone muttered. "It's already got 5,000 views." The video was everywhere. 3 miles away, in a penthouse office overlooking the city's glittering skyline, Nick Pollard's phone vibrated on his mahogany desk. He was in a meeting, 3 men in expensive suits discussing shipping routes and territorial agreements. These were discussions that shaped millions of dollars, that determined who lived and who disappeared. Nick listened with half his attention, his mind already on the next problem, the next threat, the next move in an endless chess game. Then his phone lit up, Tom's name on the screen. Tom never called during business hours, never sent messages unless it was critical. Nick felt something cold slide down his spine, instinct honed by years of surviving impossible odds. He held up one hand, silencing the room mid-sentence. 3 hardened criminals fell silent instantly, recognizing the shift in their boss's demeanor. Nick opened the message. Saw the video file. Pressed play. The world stopped. He watched his little sister, his Lorraine, his responsibility, his reason for building this bloody empire get shoved. Watched her struggle with the tray. Watched a man's fist connect with her face with sickening clarity. Watched her fall among shattering plates and spreading blood. The phone creaked in his grip. "Boss?" One of the men ventured carefully. Nick didn't respond. He watched the video again, and again. His face was perfectly still, a mask of terrifying calm that everyone in the room recognized as infinitely more dangerous than rage. He stood slowly, setting the phone down with deliberate precision. His movements were controlled, mechanical, as if he were a machine running calculations on exactly how much pain a human body could endure. "Where is this?" His voice was soft, deadly soft. One of his men, Marcus, his information specialist, quickly pulled out his own phone, fingers flying across the screen. "Cooper's Bar and Grill, 20 minutes from here. The owner is Stephen Cooper, 39, manager and partial owner. No priors, no connections to any organizations, nobody important." "He's important now," Nick said quietly. He walked to the coat rack, pulled on his jacket with methodical care, rolled up his sleeves precisely to his elbows, revealing the intricate tattoos that marked his arms art. that told the story of every battle, every loss, every line he'd crossed to build his empire. "Boss, how do you want us to handle this?" Marcus asked, already standing, ready to mobilize. Nick turned, and the men in the room instinctively took a step back. His eyes held something beyond anger, something primal and absolute. This wasn't business. This was personal. This was family. "You don't handle anything," Nick said, his voice carrying the weight of a death sentence. "This one is mine." He paused at the door, hand on the frame. "But I want 3 cars. I want every exit covered. And I want information on Stephen Cooper family, debts, fears, everything he loves. I want to know how to unmake his entire existence. How long do we have?" Nick checked his watch, a platinum Rolex that cost more than most people's yearly salary. 20 minutes. That's how long Stephen Cooper has left as the man he thinks he is. He walked out without another word, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent office. Behind him, Marcus was already making calls. Within 60 seconds, the machinery of Nick Pollard's empire was mobilized, cars dispatched, men activated, information gathered. Stephen Cooper, standing in his bar, looking at his phone with growing unease as the video's view count climbed, had no idea that death had just been placed on his schedule. He had 15 minutes of his old life remaining, and he was wasting them smiling. The bar had settled into an uneasy rhythm after the punch. Lorraine cleaned the broken plates with trembling hands, her face already swelling. Rita hovered nearby, whispering apologies she couldn't voice louder. Stephen had retreated to his office, scrolling through the comments on the viral video with growing paranoia, watching his reputation crumble in real time, while Derek tried uselessly to reassure him. The afternoon crowd had thinned, some customers uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed, others staying precisely because of it, eager to gossip about the drama. Old Tom remained in his corner booth, nursing his whiskey with unusual intensity, his eyes fixed on the entrance. He was waiting. 14 minutes had passed since he sent the video. The door opened. At first, no one noticed. The sunlight spilled across the threshold, silhouetting a tall figure in the doorway. Then the figure stepped inside, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nick Pollard moved like a predator entering familiar territory, slow, deliberate, utterly confident. He was 6'2", built lean and dangerous, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit with the jacket unbuttoned. His white dress shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled precisely to his elbows, revealing forearms covered in intricate tattoos that seemed to writhe in the dim bar. Light dragons, skulls, names of the dead, promises written in ink and blood. His face was striking sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. But it was the expression that made people's breath catch. No anger showed on his face. No fury. Just a terrifying, surgical calm. The look of a man who had already decided exactly how this would end. He didn't scan the room like someone searching. His eyes locked immediately onto one person. Lorraine, kneeling by table 6, picking up the last shards of broken ceramic with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The bar's ambient noise, conversations, laughter, the clink of glasses died in a spreading wave, like a stone dropped in still water. Customers turned, following the trajectory of that lethal gaze. Silence consumed the room with predatory efficiency. Lorraine felt the weight of that stare before she saw him. She looked up slowly, and her heart stopped. No. Nick stood 30 feet away, hands relaxed at his sides, but every line of his body screamed controlled violence. His eyes traveled from her face, taking in the split lip, the swelling cheek, the fingerprint bruises already forming on her wrist where Stephen had grabbed her down to the blood spots on her apron, then back to her eyes. She saw something break behind his expression, something that had been barely held together by promises and restraint. "Nick," she whispered, but the word came out broken, barely audible. He didn't respond, didn't acknowledge her plea. His attention shifted, scanning the room with predatory precision, cataloging exits, counting witnesses, identifying threats. This was a man who had walked into hostile territory 100 times and walked out covered in other people's blood. Old Tom caught Nick's eye and gave a small nod toward the back office, then held up 3 fingers. 3 people, manager and 2 others. Nick's jaw tightened, the only outward sign of the rage burning beneath his skin. He began walking toward Lorraine, his footsteps impossibly loud in the silence. Customers scrambled out of his path without conscious thought, bodies recognizing danger before minds could process it. A construction worker actually knocked over his beer in his haste to move his chair back. Rita saw him coming and instinctively stepped between Nick and Lorraine, some maternal instinct overriding self-preservation. "Sir, I don't know what you think." Nick looked at her. Just looked. And Rita's words died in her throat. She stepped aside, legs trembling, suddenly certain she'd just avoided something terrible. Nick knelt beside Lorraine with surprising gentleness, one hand reaching toward her injured face, stopping just short of touching. His fingers hovered near her swollen cheek, trembling with the effort of restraint. "Who?" The single word came out like gravel in broken glass. Lorraine shook her head frantically. "Nick, please, don't do this. I'm handling." "Who?" "Hurt. You." His voice was soft, almost tender. But everyone in the bar heard the promise buried underneath the guarantee of violence so absolute it would reshape reality itself. Tears finally spilled down Lorraine's cheeks. "You promised. You promised you'd let me do this on my own." Something flickered across Nick's face, pain, guilt, love twisted into something fierce and unbreakable. "I promised I'd let you live your life. I never promised I'd watch someone break you and do nothing." The office door burst open. Stephen Cooper stormed out, Derek trailing behind him, both men's faces flushed with false bravado built on ignorance. "Who the hell are you?" Stephen barked, striding forward with aggressive confidence. "You can't just walk into my bar and—" He stopped. Something in Nick's eyes, some fundamental recognition that he was staring at his own death, froze the words in his throat. Nick stood slowly, turning to face Stephen with movements that seemed to stretch time itself. He straightened to his full height, and somehow he seemed to fill the entire room. The predator had found his prey. And somewhere in the back of Stephen Cooper's mind, survival instinct began screaming. Stephen Cooper had built his entire adult life on the ability to intimidate. He was good at it. The aggressive stance, the raised voice, the willingness to escalate when others backed down. It worked on staff, on difficult customers, on anyone who valued their job or their safety more than their pride. But standing 15 feet from Nick Pollard, Stephen felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine, primal fear. It lasted only a second before his ego reasserted itself. This was his bar, his territory. He was the one with power here. "I asked you a question," Stephen said, forcing aggression into his voice. "Who the hell are you, and what gives you the right to walk into my establishment and—" "Your establishment?" Nick's voice was quiet, conversational even. He took one step forward. "Is that what you call a place where you assault women half your size?" Stephen's face flushed red. "That's between me and my employee. It's none of your business." "None of my business." Nick repeated the words like he was tasting something rotten. Another step forward. "You put your hands on her. You hit her. In front of witnesses. In front of people who did nothing." His gaze swept the room, and several customers suddenly found their drinks fascinating. Derek, sensing his boss's authority crumbling, stepped forward with misplaced loyalty. "Look, man, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to leave before—" Nick didn't even look at him. "If the next words out of your mouth aren't an apology to that woman, I will dislocate your jaw so severely you'll need surgery to eat solid food." Derek's mouth clicked shut. He took 2 steps backward, hands raised. Stephen forced a laugh, harsh, desperate. "Oh, I see. You're what, her boyfriend? Some suit who thinks he can walk in here and play hero?" He raised his voice, playing to the crowd. "This is what happens when— I'm her brother." The words fell into the room like stones into deep water. Stephen blinked, momentarily confused. "So what? That gives you the right to—" "Say my name." This came from old Tom, still sitting in his corner booth. His voice was gravelly, tired, but carried authority that made Stephen turn. Tom was looking at Nick with something between respect and fear. "Tell him your name, Nick. Let him understand." Nick's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, a door opening onto something dark and infinite. Nick Pollard. The name hit the room like a physical force. Stephen's face went through a rapid transformation, confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, absolute terror. The blood drained from his cheeks so fast he swayed on his feet. "Oh God," Derek whispered from behind the bar. His voice cracked. Oh God, Stephen, that's Nick Pollard," Rita finished, her hand covering her mouth. She looked at Lorraine with new eyes, shock, betrayal, understanding all warring across her face. "The Nick Pollard." Whispers erupted throughout the bar like wildfire. "The Pollard? Holy shit. That's the Pollard organization. I heard he killed a man with his bare hands. Stephen, what did you do? Nick let them whisper. Let the fear spread. Let Stephen Cooper feel the weight of his catastrophic mistake settle onto his shoulders like a concrete blanket. Then Nick took 3 more steps forward, closing the distance until he was 5 feet from Stephen. Close enough to smell the fear sweat. Close enough to see Stephen's pupils dilate. That woman you hit? Nick said softly, each word enunciated with terrible precision. That woman you grabbed, shoved, and punched in front of all these people. He gestured around the room. That woman bleeding on your floor. He leaned forward slightly, and Stephen actually whimpered. That's my little sister. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Stephen's legs gave out. He didn't faint, didn't collapse, just lost the ability to stand. He dropped to his knees, mouth opening and closing, soundlessly. His face had gone from red to white to a grayish green. And then it happened. A dark stain spread across the front of Stephen Cooper's khaki pants, growing rapidly. The sharp smell of urine filled the immediate area. The wet spot expanded down his legs, pooling on the floor beneath him. Someone in the bar gasped. Another let out a shocked laugh before stifling it. Stephen Cooper, the manager who had terrorized staff for 15 years, who had assaulted a young woman an hour ago, was kneeling in his own piss, shaking, broken by nothing more than a name, and the man who carried it. Nick stared down at him with no satisfaction, no joy, just cold assessment. Nick, please. Lorraine's voice came from behind him, thick with tears. Please don't do this. Not here. Not like this. Nick didn't turn around, but his voice softened fractionally when he spoke. Lorraine, go outside. No. This isn't negotiable. Neither is this. She stood, wobbling slightly, and moved beside him. Her face was swollen, her lips still bleeding, but her voice was steady. I left to escape this, to escape being the person everyone fears because of what you do. If you hurt him, if you kill him, I'll never be anything but your sister. I'll never be Lorraine. Just Pollard's sister who got a man killed. Nick's jaw clenched. His hands, relaxed at his sides, slowly curled into fists. He hit you. I know. He hurt you. I know. Her voice cracked. But I'm asking you, begging you, let me handle this my way. The entire bar held its breath, watching a mafia boss war with himself. For 10 seconds, Nick Pollard didn't move. His entire body was a coiled spring of violence, every muscle locked in place by willpower alone. He stared down at Stephen Cooper, trembling, soaked in his own urine, reduced from predator to prey in the span of minutes, and something ancient and furious demanded satisfaction. But Lorraine's hand touched his arm. Gentle, trusting. Please, she whispered. Let me keep my life. Nick closed his eyes, breathed in slowly through his nose, out through his mouth. When he opened his eyes again, the murderous edge had been filed down to something different, still dangerous, but controlled, redirected. He looked at Stephen with cold calculation. You want to handle this your way? He asked Lorraine, not taking his eyes off the manager. Yes, then I'll give you that. Nick's voice dropped to something quiet and terrible. But he doesn't get to walk away from this like nothing happened. He doesn't get to pretend this was just a mistake. He crouched down, bringing himself to Stephen's eye level. Do you understand what I'm offering you? Stephen could barely form words. What? A choice. Nick smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression anyone in that bar had ever seen. Option 1. You face the consequences of your actions through legal channels. Assault charges. The viral video as evidence. Civil lawsuit. You lose your business, your reputation, probably serve time. It's public. It's humiliating. But you walk away breathing. Stephen nodded frantically. Yes, I'm not finished. Nick's voice cracked like a whip. Option 2. We go outside. Just you and me. We have a conversation about respect, about power, about what happens to men who hurt women. It'll be quick. Relatively. He paused. But you won't be coming back inside. The room understood. Option 2 was a death sentence delivered with clinical precision. Stephen's face crumpled. Tears and snot ran freely down his face, mixing with the sweat of pure terror. Please, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know who she was. That's the problem. Nick stood abruptly, towering over him. You didn't hit my sister because you knew who she was. You hit her because you thought she was nobody. Because you thought she was powerless. Because you believed you could. He turned, addressing the entire bar, his voice carried to every corner, commanding absolute attention. Everyone in this room saw what happened. You watched him assault her. Some of you recorded it. Most of you did nothing. His gaze swept across customers who suddenly couldn't meet his eyes. You're all complicit, but you're also witnesses. And here's what's going to happen next. Nick pointed at Stephen. He's going to apologize. Not to me. To her. A real apology. The kind that comes from understanding exactly how badly you've failed as a human being. Stephen looked up at Lorraine, his face a mask of terror and shame. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled sound emerged. Out loud. Nick said softly. With words. Or we move to option 2. Stephen crawled forward on his knees, leaving a trail of urine on the floor. The humiliation was complete, the powerful reduced to something pitiful and broken. He stopped a few feet from Lorraine, unable to even look at her face. I'm sorry. His voice was barely audible. Louder, Nick commanded. Everyone needs to hear this. I'm sorry. Stephen's voice cracked. I'm sorry for hitting you, for grabbing you, for all of it. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please. His voice dissolved into sobs. Lorraine looked down at him, emotions warring across her face. Pity, disgust, sadness. Not for him for what this moment represented. The loss of her anonymity, the end of her experiment in independence. I don't forgive you, she said quietly, and I don't accept your apology. What you're sorry for is getting caught, for facing consequences. She looked at Nick, then back at Stephen. But I won't let my brother kill you. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I deserve better than carrying that weight. Nick stepped beside her, presenting a united front. Here's how this ends, he said. You sign over management of this bar to Rita, effective immediately. You'll sell your ownership stake to her for $1. I'll provide her the financing for the rest. You'll plead guilty to assault charges when they're filed. You'll make no excuses, no justifications. He leaned down, voice dropping to something only Stephen could hear. And if I ever hear your name associated with another woman being hurt, if I hear you violated the restraining order that's being filed tomorrow, if you so much as breathe in my sister's direction, option 2 comes back on the table. Permanently. Do we understand each other? Stephen nodded violently, unable to speak. Say it. I understand. I understand. Nick straightened, adjusting his cuffs with deliberate calm. He looked at Rita, whose face was still frozen in shock. You're the new manager. Congratulations. Anyone have a problem with that? Silence. Then someone started clapping slow, scattered applause that grew until half the bar was clapping. For Rita, for Lorraine, for justice served cold. Nick took Lorraine's arm gently. Come on, let's get you to a hospital. Nick, we'll talk, later. Right now, you need medical attention. As they walked toward the door, Stephen remained on the floor, broken and weeping. The predator had been reduced to prey, and everyone in that bar would remember the lesson. The video went nuclear at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, Manager Punch's Waitress instantly regrets it, had 3 million views across 4 platforms. By 3 a.m., it had spawned 17 reaction videos, 2 news articles, and a trending hashtag, #Cooper's Bar Assault. Lorraine sat in Nick's penthouse, an ice pack pressed to her swollen cheek, watching her phone explode with notifications. The hospital had confirmed no fractures, just severe bruising, a split lip requiring 2 stitches, and soft tissue damage that would heal in weeks. The physical wounds were temporary. The emotional ones were still being calculated. Nick stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouette dark against the city lights, silent and rigid. He'd barely spoken since they left the bar. His knuckles were white where they gripped his whiskey glass. It's everywhere, Lorraine said softly, scrolling through her phone. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. Someone identified the bar. They've identified Stephen. She paused on one video, a commentary channel with 800,000 subscribers. The host was mid-rant. This is exactly what's wrong with workplace culture. This manager felt so entitled, so untouchable, that he assaulted an employee in front of witnesses. And look at everyone just standing there. Lorraine closed the app. The validation felt hollow. Her phone buzzed. Rita's name appeared. Rita, are you okay? I'm so sorry I didn't do more. I was scared, and that's not an excuse. I should have protected you. Rita, Stephen's been fired. The owner came in personally and escorted him out. He's done. Rita. Also, are you really Nick Pollard's sister? I don't even know what to say. I feel like I don't know you at all. Lorraine stared at the messages, throat tightening. This was what she'd feared the moment when people stopped seeing her and only saw the shadow she cast. "They're tearing him apart," she said aloud. Nick turned from the window. "Good. Nick. He hit you, Lorraine. He humiliated you in front of a room full of people. He made you bleed." His voice was controlled, but barely. "The world finding out what kind of man he is? That's not justice. That's just truth." By dawn, Stephen Cooper's life had been systematically dismantled by the internet's ruthless machinery. Someone leaked his employment history, 4 previous restaurants, 3 with harassment complaints that had been quietly settled. Women started coming forward with stories, inappropriate comments, aggressive behavior, retaliation against those who refused his advances. A former employee posted a video. "Stephen Cooper made my life hell for 6 months. He'd stand too close, touch my lower back, make comments about my body. When I reported it, I was fired for performance issues. I'm glad everyone finally sees who he really is." The video had 500,000 views in 2 hours. Local news picked up the story by 6 a.m. A reporter stood outside Cooper's Bar and Grill, now cordoned off with police tape, delivering a breathless report. The viral video has sparked conversations about workplace safety, power dynamics, and the pervasive culture of abuse many service workers face daily. Stephen's social media accounts, all set to public, were flooded with thousands of comments. "You're disgusting. Hope you rot in prison. This is what a coward looks like. Someone find out where he lives." That last one made Lorraine's stomach turn. This wasn't justice anymore. This was a digital mob, hungry for blood. By noon, Stephen had been officially charged with assault and battery. His mugshot appeared online, eyes red and swollen, face slack with defeat. The man who'd stood over her with such arrogant confidence 12 hours ago looked like a ghost. By 3 p.m., he'd been evicted from his apartment. The landlord, facing pressure from other tenants who'd seen the video, terminated his lease for creating an unsafe environment. By 6 p.m., Stephen's mother was giving a tearful interview to a local news station. "My son made a terrible mistake. He's not a monster. Please, just leave our family alone." But the internet wasn't interested in nuance or redemption. Lorraine watched it all unfold from Nick's penthouse, a prisoner of her own viral fame. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing, reporters requesting interviews, producers pitching documentary ideas, advocacy groups wanting her to become a spokesperson for workplace assault survivors. She'd turned off notifications after the 100th message. "They want to make me a symbol," she told Nick, voice hollow. "The brave waitress who stood up to abuse. They don't know I didn't stand up." I froze. I was helpless. Nick sat beside her, close but not touching, respecting her space. "You survived. That's not helpless. I survived because of you, because of your name." She looked at him, eyes filling with tears. "I left to prove I could exist without being Nick Pollard's sister. And the first time something goes wrong, you show up and everyone remembers exactly who I am, who I'll always be." The words hung between them, not accusation, just painful truth. Nick's jaw worked silently. "If I could go back, you'd do the same thing. You'd always do the same thing." She wasn't angry, just resigned. "You love me too much to let me fall. And I love you too much to ask you to watch me break." Outside, the city continued its relentless transformation of Stephen Cooper from person to cautionary tale, from abuser to destroyed. But inside that penthouse, 2 siblings sat in the ruins of a promise neither had been able to keep. The silence between them stretched for 3 days. Lorraine stayed in Nick's penthouse not because he asked, but because reporters had found her apartment and camped outside with cameras and microphones. Her face was healing, the swelling reduced to a yellowish bruise that makeup could almost cover. The physical damage was fading. The rift between her and Nick was growing. He gave her space, something that clearly tortured him. She'd catch him standing in doorways, watching her with an expression of such profound pain it made her chest ache. But he never pushed, never demanded conversation, just hovered at the edges of her exile, a guardian she hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. On the 4th morning, Lorraine found him on the balcony at dawn. He stood at the railing, still wearing yesterday's clothes, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table beside him. He looked exhausted, not physically, but spiritually, like he was carrying weight that was finally breaking him. She stepped outside, the morning air cool against her skin. For a moment, neither spoke. "I ruined it, didn't I?" Nick's voice was rough, broken. "Your fresh start. Your chance to be someone other than my sister. I destroyed it in 5 minutes." Lorraine leaned against the railing beside him, staring out at the city waking below. You saved me. Same thing, apparently. Nick. No, let me. He turned to face her, and she was shocked to see tears in his eyes. Nick Pollard, the man who'd built an empire on fear and violence, was crying. I've spent 15 years trying to protect you. From everything. From the world that killed Mom and Dad. From people who'd use you to get to me. From anyone who'd see you as weak or vulnerable or less than you are. His voice cracked. But I never protected you from myself. From what I am. From the cage I built around you that I called love. Lorraine felt her own tears start. You did what you thought was right. I smothered you. The words came out like a confession torn from his soul. You were 9 years old when Mom died. 9. And I decided that I'd never let anything hurt you again. I built this empire with blood so you could go to good schools. I destroyed people who looked at you wrong so you could feel safe. I became a monster so you wouldn't have to be afraid. He laughed a broken, bitter sound. But the thing I never realized, the thing I was too stupid and arrogant to see, you weren't afraid of the world. You were afraid of never being more than my shadow. Lorraine wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. I know why you did it. I've always known. You were a child trying to protect another child, and you did the only thing you knew how. You became what the world demanded, something terrifying enough that nothing could touch us. She took his hand, scarred, calloused, stained with years of violence, and held it between both of hers. You gave me everything, Nick. Education, safety, a life without fear. But you never gave me the chance to fail, to struggle, to prove I could survive something on my own. And then Stephen Cooper happened, Nick said bitterly. And then Stephen Cooper happened, she echoed. And I did fail. I froze. I got hurt. And my big brother showed up and fixed it just like he always does. Nick pulled his hand away, turning back to the city. So what now? You go back to hating me? Resenting me? Running away every time I try to keep you safe? Is that what you think? Lorraine's voice sharpened. That I hate you? You should. Well, I don't. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. I love you. I've always loved you. You're my brother, my protector, the person who sacrificed everything so I could have a childhood after ours was stolen. But loving you and needing space from you, those aren't contradictory. Nick's face twisted with pain. I don't know how to love you without protecting you. Then learn. Her voice was firm but gentle. Because I'm not 9 anymore, Nick. I'm 25. And I need to know I can survive this world, not because you've eliminated every threat, but because I'm strong enough to handle what comes. Even if it means watching you get hurt? Even then. Nick closed his eyes, and when he opened them, something had shifted. Not surrender, transformation. After Mom died, do you know what I promised her? At her grave? Lorraine shook her head. I promised I'd give you the life she wanted for you. Normal. Safe. Happy. His voice was barely a whisper. I've spent 15 years keeping that promise. But maybe what Mom really wanted was for you to choose your own life. Not the one I built. The one you build. He looked at her directly. Really looked at her. And she saw the boy he'd been 14 years old. Terrified. Responsible for a 9-year-old sister in a world that had just murdered their parents. That boy had never healed. He'd just armored himself in violence and power. I'm sorry, Nick said, for suffocating you, for making you feel like you had to erase your own name to be free, for showing up at that bar and... His voice broke. For not being able to watch you bleed and do nothing. Lorraine threw her arms around him, and Nick collapsed into the embrace like a man who'd been holding himself together through pure willpower. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. 15 years of fear and love and guilt finally breaking through. I don't want you to do nothing, Lorraine whispered into his shoulder. I just want you to trust me to ask for help when I need it. To let me fall sometimes. To let me be imperfect and struggling and human. I don't know if I can. Then we'll figure it out together. Boundaries, communication, therapy probably. She pulled back, managing a weak smile. Lots of therapy. Nick laughed raw and genuine. I'm not good at boundaries. No kidding. They stood together in the morning light, the city sprawling below them, a city Nick controlled through fear, a city Lorraine wanted to navigate as herself. Can I ask you something? Lorraine said after a moment. Anything. When you walked into that bar, were you planning to kill him? Nick was quiet for a long time. Yes. What changed? You asked me not to. He met her eyes. You asked me to let you keep your life. And I realized that if I killed him, I'd be doing exactly what I've always done, deciding what's best for you without asking what you wanted, taking your choice away. He paused, jaw tightening. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than anything I've built, anyone I've faced. Standing in that bar, looking at your face, knowing he hurt you and choosing restraint, that went against every instinct I have. But you did it. I did it because you asked. Because your voice mattered more than my rage. He took her hands. I'm not good at this, Lorraine. At letting go. At trusting that the world won't destroy you the moment I'm not watching. But I'll try. For you, I'll try. Lorraine squeezed his hands. That's all I'm asking. The sun continued rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere below, Stephen Cooper was waking up in his mother's basement, his life in ruins. Somewhere, Rita was opening Cooper's bar under new management. Somewhere, the viral video was still spreading, still generating outrage and commentary. But on that balcony, two siblings who'd survived the impossible began the hard work of learning to love each other without suffocation, of finding the balance between protection and freedom, between family and independence. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, arguments, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But they were trying. And sometimes, trying was the bravest thing you could do. 3 months passed. Lorraine had moved into a new apartment, still modest, still independent, but in a better neighborhood. Nick had offered to buy her a luxury condo. She'd refused. They'd compromised on him covering the security deposit, and only after she'd agreed to let him install a better lock on the door. Progress. She'd started working at a small bookstore in the arts district, quiet, low-key, owned by an elderly woman named Margaret, who'd never heard of Nick Pollard and didn't care about viral videos. It was peaceful, normal, exactly what Lorraine needed. The bruises had healed completely. The stitches had dissolved. The nightmares came less frequently. Rita called every week. They'd meet for coffee, and Rita would update her on the bar, which was thriving under new management, with better policies and an actual HR complaint system. Several former employees had come back, hearing the toxic environment had been cleaned out. Stephen Cooper had disappeared from public view. The assault charges had resulted in 6 months in county jail, suspended pending completion of anger management courses and community service. He'd been ordered to stay 500 feet away from Lorraine at all times. His social media accounts had been deleted. His name had become synonymous with workplace abuse. Most people assumed he'd left the city, slinking away to rebuild somewhere his reputation hadn't followed. Most people were wrong. Stephen Cooper was still in the city, still seething, still convinced that he was the real victim. He'd spent 3 months in his mother's basement, watching the walls close in. 3 months of scrolling through comment sections, reading the hatred, watching his life become a cautionary tale used by HR departments and workplace safety advocates. 3 months of blaming everyone except himself. It was Lorraine's fault for being too sensitive. Nick Pollard's fault for overreacting. The internet's fault for ruining his life over one mistake. Society's fault for not understanding that he'd been under stress, that managing a bar was hard, that everyone made errors in judgment. The court-mandated anger management classes only made it worse. Sitting in circles with other men who'd lost control, listening to therapists talk about accountability and taking responsibility, it all felt like persecution. Like the world ganging up on him for being male, for being in a position of authority, for existing. By month 3, Stephen had convinced himself of a new narrative. He'd been set up. Lorraine wasn't just some innocent waitress. She was bait, a plant sent by Nick Pollard to infiltrate his bar, to create an incident that would justify a takeover. The whole thing had been planned from the beginning, the accidental spill, the recording, the viral video. It was all orchestrated to destroy him and steal his business. It made perfect sense to Stephen. It explained everything. It meant he wasn't the villain, he was the victim of a sophisticated criminal conspiracy, and victims deserve justice. He started small, creating anonymous accounts on social media, posting his theory on Reddit forums and conspiracy theory boards. Most people ignored him or called him delusional, but a few, the eternal contrarians, the men's rights activists, the people who saw every woman's complaint as a false accusation, those few listened. They encouraged him, told him he was right, that he should fight back, that Nick Pollard had too much power and someone needed to expose him. Stephen became emboldened. He started following Lorraine. Nothing overt, just happening to be in the same coffee shop, the same grocery store, the same street, staying exactly 501 feet away, technically not violating the restraining order. but close enough to be seen, close enough to make a point. Lorraine noticed on the third coincidence. Her stomach dropped when she saw him across the street from the bookstore, standing in the same spot for 45 minutes, just watching. She called Nick immediately. "He's following me." Nick's voice went cold. "Where are you?" "The bookstore. He's across the street." "Nick, I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking he just violated his probation and the restraining order. He's technically outside the distance." "I don't care about technically." She heard movement in the background, keys jingling. "I'm sending Marcus and 2 others. They'll be there in 5 minutes. Do not leave that building until they arrive." "Nick." "Lorraine, please. Let me do this. Let me keep you safe this one time." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle it herself, but the fear in her stomach was real, and denying it felt like pride that might get her hurt. "Okay," she whispered. 5 minutes. Marcus and his team arrived in 4. Stephen saw the black SUV pull up, saw the men emerge all muscle and quiet menace and ran. But running in Nick Pollard's city was like running in a cage. There was nowhere Stephen Cooper could hide that he wouldn't be found. They brought him to a warehouse-neutral territory. No cameras, just concrete and shadows. Nick was already there when they arrived, standing in the center of the empty space, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Stephen was shoved forward, stumbling to his knees. "You violated the restraining order," Nick said conversationally, "following my sister, making her afraid in her own city. After everything that happened. You still haven't learned." Stephen's earlier bravado had evaporated during the car ride, but desperation made him stupid. "I have rights. You can't just kidnap me. I'll go to the police." Nick laughed. Not a warm sound. "You're going to go to the police and tell them what? That the man whose sister you assaulted is holding you accountable? That the justice system's slap on the wrist wasn't enough, so you decided to stalk her, and now you're facing real consequences?" He crouched down to Stephen's level. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this city, tonight. You're going to move at least 2 states away. You're going to get a job that has nothing to do with food service or managing people. You're going to check in with a parole officer monthly and prove you're staying away. You can't make me. Option 2, Nick continued as if Stephen hadn't spoken, is that I stop being reasonable. I stop letting my sister's mercy protect you, and we have a very different conversation about consequences." Stephen's face went pale. "You're threatening me." "No, I'm educating you." Nick stood, brushing off his knees. "You had a chance at redemption. You had court-ordered classes, probation, a path forward. But you chose to blame everyone else. To stalk my sister. To convince yourself you were the victim." He turned to Marcus. "Get him a bus ticket. Escort him to his mother's house to pack a bag. Then put him on the bus and make sure he leaves." "And if he comes back?" Marcus asked. Nick looked at Stephen with eyes that held no mercy, no hesitation. "Then he's choosing option 2, and we won't be having another conversation." Stephen opened his mouth to protest, but something in Nick's expression stopped him. He saw his own death in those eyes, not a threat, but a promise. A line already drawn that would be crossed the moment he stepped over it. "I'll go," he whispered. "I'll leave." "Smart man." Nick walked toward the exit, then paused. "Stephen, you had every advantage. Authority, power, respect that came with the job. And you used it to abuse people weaker than you. That's what destroyed you. Not me. Not my sister. You." He left without looking back. 3 hours later, Stephen Cooper boarded a Greyhound bus bound for Oklahoma. He carried 1 bag, $200 in cash Nick had provided, and the crushing weight of a life completely destroyed by his own choices. He never returned to the city, and Lorraine Pollard finally stopped looking over her shoulder. 6 months after the punch heard around the internet, Lorraine stood in front of a small storefront with a for lease sign in the window. It was perfect. Small but not cramped. Good light. Located in a quiet neighborhood with foot traffic but not chaos. Close enough to downtown for customers, far enough from Cooper's bar to feel like a fresh start. "What do you think?" Rita asked beside her, practically vibrating with excitement. Lorraine smiled. "I think it's exactly right. They'd been planning this for months, a cafe and bookstore hybrid. Lorraine's dream combined with Rita's baking skills. A place that felt safe and warm, where people could read and eat and not worry about hostile management or toxic environments. They'd saved every penny. Lorraine from her bookstore wages. Rita from the modest profits she'd managed to generate at Cooper's before selling it to a restaurant group for a sum that left her tearful and grateful. Nick had offered to fund the entire venture. Lorraine had refused. They'd negotiated a compromise. He could be a silent investor for 10% equity, but she and Rita would maintain majority control and make all decisions. It had taken 3 arguments and 1 very tense dinner, but Nick had finally agreed. Learning to let go was a process for both of them. "We'll need to repaint," Rita said, already planning. "Maybe a warm cream color? And we should install better lighting. Oh, and shelving, lots of shelving for the books." Lorraine laughed. "We haven't even signed the lease yet. Details." Rita waved her hand dismissively. "I can already see it. The 2nd chapter. That's what we're calling it, right?" "The 2nd chapter," Lorraine repeated, tasting the words. A name that meant new beginnings, fresh starts. The idea that your story didn't end with 1 bad chapter, it kept going. They signed the lease 2 days later. The renovation took 6 weeks. Nick showed up on the 3rd day with a construction crew, a gift he insisted wasn't overstepping because every business needs contractors, and I just happened to know some. Lorraine had rolled her eyes but accepted the help. The cafe opened on a Saturday in late spring. The line stretched down the block, partly from genuine interest, partly from people who recognized Lorraine from the viral video and wanted to support her. She'd worried about being recognized, about being reduced to that waitress from the video forever. But most customers just ordered coffee and pastries, complimented the space, and treated her like any other business owner. A few asked for selfies. She politely declined. This wasn't about her trauma becoming a brand, it was about building something real. Rita worked the counter with fierce joy, her smile genuine for the first time in years. 3 former Cooper's employees had applied to work with them, all women who'd left toxic situations, who understood what the 2nd chapter really meant. Nick came on opening day. He didn't announce himself, just slipped in during the mid-morning rush and sat in the back corner with a newspaper and black coffee. Lorraine spotted him after 20 minutes and brought over a fresh pastry. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "Yes, I did." He smiled, a real smile, soft and proud. "You did this, Lorraine. Not me. Not my money or my name. You and Rita built this from nothing. You helped. I provided contractors. You provided the vision, the work, the courage to try again after someone tried to break you." He stood, pulling her into a brief hug. "I'm proud of you. Mom and Dad would be proud of you." Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. "Nick, I'm going to leave now. Let you enjoy this without your overprotective brother hovering." He paused at the door, looking back. "But I'll be back next week, just as a customer, if that's okay." "That's more than okay." He nodded and left, and Lorraine watched him go with a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, peaceful certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The cafe thrived. Word spread about the quality of Rita's baking, about the carefully curated book selection, about the atmosphere of genuine warmth and safety. Within 3 months, they were profitable. Within 6, they were considering expanding hours. Stephen Cooper's name faded from the news cycle, replaced by newer scandals and viral moments. Occasionally someone would recognize the location from the video, but mostly people just saw a good cafe run by 2 women who cared about their work. Lorraine still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at sudden movements, still carried the memory of that punch and the humiliation that followed. Trauma didn't evaporate just because justice was served, but she also carried new memories of building something from nothing, proving she could survive and thrive without her brother's shadow, of Rita's friendship and the customers who became regulars and the small moments of joy that accumulated into a life worth living. One evening, after closing, Lorraine sat alone in the cafe with a cup of tea and one of her favorite books. The space was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city outside. Her phone buzzed. Nick's name appeared. "Nick, saw the news article about the cafe. They called you an entrepreneur and survivor. Not bad. Lorraine, I prefer caffeine dealer and book pusher." "Nick, that works too. Dinner this weekend? Just family. No business. No bodyguards." Lorraine, "Perfect. I'll bring dessert." Nick, "Rita's lemon bars?" Lorraine, "Obviously." She set down her phone and looked around the space she'd built, the shelves she'd assembled, the menu she'd designed, the dream she'd refused to let die even after someone tried to break her. The punch Stephen Cooper threw didn't break Lorraine Pollard. It didn't define her or destroy her or reduce her to a victim in someone else's story. It became the catalyst for something better, a 2nd chapter written in her own words, on her own terms, with people who chose to stand beside her, instead of over her. And in the end, that was the best revenge possible. Living well, loving freely, and building a life that no one could take away. Because sometimes the person you underestimate isn't powerless. They're just waiting for their moment to show you who they really are. And Lorraine Pollard's story was just beginning. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going. And make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.